a god who lives on his fathers, who feeds on his mothers. Unus is the bull of heaven, who rages in his heart, who lives on the being of every god, who eats their entrails. When they come, their bodies full of magic from the Isle of Flames.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Human mastication, salutations, all you cognonauts out there, and welcome to another episode of Exofathom, the show that dares to explore the outside reaches of understanding. I am Nick, and I am joined by my lovely two co-hosts. Ayla, how are you?
Yeah, feeling lovely. How about you?
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. And we got Mike. What's going on, man?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. You know how it goes.
I do indeed. Everybody is sipping a nice cup of tea. It's windy outside. It's dark.
Oh, yeah.
The perfect setting for a very dark episode. Tonight we're going to be talking about cannibalism. And
what's dark about that?
Well,
oh no, you can. I guess you could eat it raw, right?
You could, but that would be very dangerous. Oh God, Jesus! All right, Hannibal.
One of us had to do it.
Funny enough, I actually didn't even think about Hannibal Lecter when I was researching this episode.
What? Oh, you went
yeah.
old school. I see. Look at you.
Yeah. I kind of went to like just historical and like mythology and that type of stuff, but it was a real bummer of a episode or research, anyways. You find out that cannibalism is quite common and still goes on today.
Stop.
Is that the bummer? I thought it was going to just be like uninteresting research. It's like, yeah, humans eat humans.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to simplify it to that, then yeah, that might be a little bit of a bummer because it's not as mystical as it might be, but it is quite common. And that to me is the bummer.
As long as you've included the mummy thing.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be talking about mummy mania. Definitely.
Which I can't wrap my head around. Sorry, guys. That's a bit of a teaser, but Nick was doing research and he just was like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
What about the prions?
Well, yeah, prions disease is definitely a hazard.
That's the major drawback I see in cannibalism. Not the morality, just the prions.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. Just the rogue proteins that turn you into a zombie. Yeah.
Yep, that's it. That's the only issue.
Only drawbacks. Yeah, that's what prions disease. Actually, it's a good thing we would just bring this up on the front because I didn't really dive too much into this, but there's something called prions, and I guess they're like proteins, and they're high in concentration in like human meat. So if you consume too much humans, you collect these prions in your brain, and it gives you like reduced motor function, a couple other things, but it's kind of the same concept as the zombie almost.
Yeah. I think it might eventually lead to death. Too.
Yeah, definitely does.
That's crazy. Now, is that just if humans eat humans, or does that apply to like a bear that eats too much human? Like we give them indigestion?
I don't know. That's a good question. It does apply to humans eating humans. Also, humans eating certain types of brains. Prions tend to be high collection in brain matter. So like eating calf brain or the brain of another animal.
Monkey brain.
That's
monkey
strange.
Brain. Yeah. If not properly cooked, can give you prion disease. Yeah. So that's all the fun stuff that we have in store for tonight. We're going to be talking about some mythology, some early cases of cannibalism, some modern cases of cannibalism, and maybe we'll talk loosely about why the hell this is happening. And that'll probably be an interesting conversation for sure. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have an intro question to you guys, but I guess if we're just going to jump right into
have you ever eaten human?
the darkness. If we want to jump right into the darkness, is there any? Okay, here's my question: is there any instance in which you would consume human meat?
Sure.
Oh.
Survival.
You said that way too quickly.
I know. I'm not going on any trips with you.
No
No
camping
flights.
trips with Mike.
No.
Oh, come on. Just one. You're only going to need one.
That's right.
Yeah, like survival situations
Mm-hmm.
get pushed to that limit. I mean, so I've thought about this since learning about the Donner Party as a kid and trying to put myself in those situations. And I think if I was hungry enough and the situation was that bad, then yeah, I would hopefully not draw the short straw of being eaten, but I wouldn't mind that either, right?
Oh, you wouldn't mind it, really? Just
hey, I'm
someone
trying
had
to check out of this place as soon as possible. All right, why not? Give myself as food to the others. I guess it's like being bitten by a mosquito in a bigger sense. Like, yeah, you die, but you end up feeding somebody else and help them survive. You
Yeah,
help
but
the
here's the
mosquito
thing.
survive.
Yeah, okay. But if we were on like a camping trip, for example, and it's the three of us, and you, Mike, selflessly sacrifice yourself, there's no way that no matter how hungry, I'm not gonna be like, all right, let's just cut off a piece of Mike's butt, that's got some good, muscle on it, and let's go. Like, I don't know. I think I would. Because I also think about this because of that Donner Party story. And I remember like we were all really young when that came out, and it was really like, whoa. And it got me on this thing of like, just because you can survive certain situations doesn't necessarily mean you'll want to. And like, I think for me, I draw the line at like having to eat people. I think I would much rather just take my chances hiking and freeze to death in that case. You know what I mean? Like, at least I'm trying to
I
walk
get it.
my path. Yeah, because that's the other thing too that makes me think about those extreme circumstances is if you're willing to abandon all that morality just for the sake of survival. And then when you come back to regular life, it's kind of like, how do you
transformation?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't want to deal with all that. Like, I would rather freeze.
I think that there's just like a certain point where you stop thinking about morality. That those survival instincts become so like when you starve to death, the crazy thing is that your brain will actually eat your heart muscle to keep your brain functioning, right? So your brain doesn't really care about anything else other than itself. So there might be a situation where right now you're like, yep, just keep hiking, and then you like, I don't know, that cut of Mike is starting to look real good all of a sudden. I'm just starting to get hungry.
I would hope that bugs were already exhausted by the time somebody was trying to eat me.
Bugs, bark, berries.
But yeah, of course.
Now here's the question: would you want us to keep you alive and just like cut off a little piece? Like there's this American Horror Story
just
film.
Bash me over the head with a rock and call it a day. What are you, crazy? Don't keep me alive for that.
Do you guys think it's a psyop that Donner Party is one letter off from dinner party?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. No, I always thought that there was something fishy about that story. Like, I don't know why. It just seemed like, I don't know. We'll be wrapping up with that.
A little retelling of that, not the entire thing, because it was a long ordeal. It lasted for a year. And it was, it was the Oregon Trails, basically. So back in the 1840s, people were going from, I believe it was Missouri to California.
Oh,
and they got stranded in the Sierra Nevadas. And no fun. We'll get into that. That'll be later down in the episode. But first, I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the mythology surrounding cannibalism. I chose mythology first, and then I'm going to get into some of the more historical stuff, but I just figured that it would help contextualize maybe some of the reasons that cannibalism was a practice. It might also give us some ideas about why it continues today. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was Cronus. We've had the discussions on this podcast before about Cronus. Cronus is the son of Uranus and the father of Zeus and the 12 Olympians. And in Cronus's overthrowing of his father, to become the ruler of the universe. Basically, Cronus is given I believe it's a sickle or it's a scythe by his mother Gaia, which is like symbolizes the earth. And then he proceeds to castrate his father Uranus in order to spill his blood, and part of that blood flurry becomes the foam that Aphrodite is born from. But this is all to say that Cronus decided to usurp his father in order to become the ruler of the universe. He succeeds. Yes. Uh-huh.
So the most beautiful, like the goddess of beauty, comes from the castration blood of a dying god.
It's not really the blood.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
Comes from the sperm of
the
Cronus,
white foam.
or Uranus. Yeah, the white
I
foam.
see.
Yeah. So Cronus does that to his father. He castrates him. Very symbolic and Oedipal, if you ask me. The Greeks were on some weird shit. Yeah. And so he becomes the ruler of the universe. And his sister, it becomes his chick. I believe her name was Rhea. And at one point, Rhea comes to, or no, I'm sorry, his mother Gaia comes to Cronus and tells him that he will be succeeded by his children. And in a fit of paranoia, Cronus decides that every time Rhea bores a child of his, he consumes them. And there's a very famous painting. I forget who's the guy. You guys know, is it Goya?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Goya's famous painting of Saturn eating his children is out there for all to see. I think everybody's probably seen that. If you haven't, you've seen it before and just don't remember. But in that sort of yes,
grotesque, ocular, yucky assault. Goya.
What? Oh, okay. There you go.
You're doing like art history mnemonics, so you can remember that.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
There you go. That works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it is very grotesque. But Cronus decides he's going to eat all of his children because he's told that one of his children will end up usurping him, just like he did to his father. And so his inclination is to just swallow them whole once they're born. Of course, Rhea, his wife, is able to smuggle Zeus away before he catches, or before he's able to eat Zeus. Rhea puts a stone in a blanket and gives it to Cronus, and he swallows it whole. That's all to just sort of give us a prelude into the concepts of cannibalism within mythology. The Greeks, there's another example I have that's going to be coming in just a second, had a lot of accounts of cannibalism. And really, going through my research here, it's every human, every culture on Earth has at some point practiced cannibalism. And so I'm wondering if there's any sort of symbolism that we can pluck from this Cronus myth. I thought to myself, the concept of self-preservation being a pusher to that type of act. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean that definitely seems like a good. I mean, yeah, like with the Donner Party, with anything else, early human would have had a lot more struggle for food and things like that. So I could imagine a lot of this coming out of self-preservation. But I also think there's an element of power exchange that's happening. So to me, it seems like part of cannibalism is also somehow to nourish oneself with the power of another, perhaps.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, I would say that's one of the big reasons cannibalism exists. And I was able to sort of parse out a few different specific reasons. And the first we've already spoken of was the self-preservation with the Donner Party, or even Cronus, swallowing his children to protect himself from his ultimate demise. But there's also the transference of power, where we'll learn later there's medicinal purposes, quote unquote. Some people do it out of pleasure, which we'll talk about later as well.
Ew.
And some do it for this concept of transformation. And I really think that that's an interesting sort of idea, this idea of transformation. because it reminds me of that movie Red Dragon. Do you guys remember that? It was like a sequel to Silence of the Lambs, but it was a prequel.
Oh yes.
Yeah, with
The
Ray
broken mirror
Ray
before.
Fiennes. Yeah. And it was about this guy. I think it was actually Goya too. It was like a Goya painting he was obsessed with. I could be wrong about that, but this serial killer was all about this concept of transformation, and I think that's an interesting sort of abstract concept to link to cannibalism too, because if you think about this transference of power, you're sort of transforming yourself into something greater than, or in other cases, depending on the culture, much more depraved and evil.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes sense, right? Like you're adding parts of someone else to you, or adding on to your power from other people's power. So you're transforming into like some weird sadistic Voltron.
Yeah, or almost like a twin that like
Ate the other
absorbs
twin.
the other twin. Yeah,
I was thinking the same thing, Nick.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, how would they know back in the day? But if they did know,
yeah. I mean, even sharks do that. Sharks do that sort of thing. If they're not born into single purses like some sharks are, they're inside the mother's belly and they eat each other inside the mother's belly, and then like only a few are left.
Yeah. Well, and it's like Jet Li's The One, which we often bring up on
Yes, we
this
do.
show. But it is an intriguing thought, that you could somehow transform through that act. And I wonder to what extent transformation is dependent upon the taboo aspect of it, because like you do see in a lot of movies where somebody does something that's like against the grain or taboo, or you don't do that, and that becomes the trigger that transforms them into something else. Kind of like that episode we did on the hero's journey, right? Like you deviate from your norm, and that's cannibalism's a big deviation. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, in some respects, it's probably one of the ultimate transformations or deviations, right?
Okay, are you trying to sell us on it now? I mean, my
No,
goodness.
no, I'm not.
Just kidding.
No, but I am saying that it is quite extreme. I can only think of a couple other things that I would rank even more extreme than cannibalism.
Oh yeah. Well, and when you think about like the occult and people who might be inclined to, I don't know, like do bad things to harness evil power or whatever, like that's pretty high up there. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's good that we're kind of talking about this idea of transformation, because the next little myth that I have for you guys is the myth of Lamia, which is also a Greek myth. And in the earliest stories, she was a queen of Libya who had an affair with Zeus. We all know where that leads. And upon learning this, Zeus's wife Hera forces Lamia to eat her own children, the offspring of her affair with Zeus, and afflicted her with permanent insomnia. Zeus then takes pity on her and endows her with the gift of prophecy and the ability to temporarily remove her eyes so that she may rest.
Oh, thanks, Zeus. That's so comforting.
I know, right?
What the hell?
Yeah. Dude, those two are so fucked up. Zeus and Hera are just a mess.
Dude.
They are a problem.
Oh my God. Can we do like a Real Housewives of the Greek pantheon or something like that? Like that needs to be a show where
that sounds like a skit. Yeah. It goes on to say that the Lamai also became a type of phantom synonymous with the Empuse, who seduced young men to satisfy their sexual appetite and feed on their flesh afterwards. And so it's said that the Lamai were inspired by the myth of Lamia, but Lamia had been ascribed serpentine qualities, which some commenters believe that been firmly traced to the mythology from antiquity, and they have found analogs to ancient texts that could be designated as Lamia, which would describe her as a serpentine being, and these included a woman with a half snake, and who was also apparently one of the monsters that had to face the Argus in the Argonaut saga. But according to the myth, Hera deprived Lamia of the ability to sleep, making her constantly grieve over the loss of her children. And then that's when Zeus was like, I'm going to take some pity on her, and gave her the ability to shapeshift and to remove her eyes. And so I brought this myth up because that concept of shape-shifting popped up and seemed to me a little bit like this conversation about transformation. And it seems like a connection that we could connect the dots with if we wanted to, that she becomes this type of shape-shifting serpentine creature after eating her children, or after consuming another human being.
Yeah, but it's not. It's a gift granted, right? Like the punishment is to eat the humans, and then a gift is given to her to shapeshift.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but it's not directly derived from eating another human.
Right. That is true. I mean, it isn't necessarily derived. We'll have to talk about the next one to get a little bit more about this idea of a curse. But I thought it was interesting because what's her name? Lamia. Sorry. She was a human before. And it was only after, because she was a queen of Libya, and she wasn't a snake before. And so it's sort of after that she becomes this serpentine thing. And I guess it is considered a gift, if you want to call it that. It's a Zeus gift. So there we go.
You know, don't accept things from Zeus, you know?
Yeah, ever.
Don't sleep with Zeus or Hera. Just stay away.
Seriously. Run away if you can as quickly as possible. That's for sure. But, you know, to touch base on this sort of topic of transformation a little bit too, I have this, this is sort of like a cryptid, I guess you would call it, but they're called the Wichuge. And it's an evil spirit from the Athabascan people. And it's said to be a person who has been possessed or overwhelmed by the power of one of the ancient giant spirit animals. And it's related, this concept of being possessed is sort of like a curse for becoming too strong or being too strong. Maybe could translate that to sort of hubris. But these giant animals were crafty, intelligent, powerful, and somehow retained their power despite being transformed into normal-sized animals in the present day. And there's a professor, Robert Ridgington, who came across the stories of the Wichuge while listening to some of the tribes people, and particularly the Daneza believed that one could become a Wichuge by breaking a taboo and becoming quote-unquote too strong. Examples of these taboos, and this is where I thought it was funny. Examples of these taboos include persons having a photo taken with a flash, listening to music made of a stretched string or hide, such as a guitar, or eating meat with flies in it.
Oh,
yeah.
It's just a good rule in general.
You shouldn't probably eat meat with flies in it. Yeah, that is a good rule in general.
Just take the why are you? My Google got real interested in eating meat with flies in it.
Ooh, yum!
You know, just take the flies out before you eat it.
Yeah. But I do like this concept of like the Wichuge because it reminds me a little bit, Ayla, of like almost like a skinwalker type, spirit, but
yeah, totally.
Particularly, it's interesting to me too is that this is considered a curse that you become this Wichuge when you are quote unquote too strong. I don't know. I would relate that to hubris, but what do you guys think too strong is?
Probably just functioning outside of like society, right? Like you become more powerful than the group that holds you, or you just start to do things that are too different. I don't know if it's like there is a connection between ego and metaphorical cannibalism, right? But which then can relate to this hubris notion. But I think it's just, especially like mentioning the taboos, just things that aren't traditional within that society. Right, like having your photo taken is also too something that, like Native Americans can freak out about, like your soul is being stolen.
Right.
Uh, the string instrument, and which is we were talking about Libya, right? Because there's a lot of drum music happening, not so much guitar music. So
This
again,
is yeah.
This is Athabascan people,
Athabascan, yeah.
like
So northern, like
Western
Canada,
Canada.
yeah.
okay. Um, hmm. But it just seems like it's more drum centric as a society goes. But the
Maybe.
string instruments, for some reason, isn't really part of that. So again, taboo.
It
Well,
reminds me of people saying the Beatles were the devil for playing the guitar. You know, like,
Well,
well,
there's like,
actually, it also I think has to do with reverence. I think for the animal. So like, you know, string with the stretch, like a stretched string or hide. A lot of times in these cultures, you could have like, let's say a bow and arrow is used for hunting, right? But the bow is strung with some sort of hide. There's a connection, right, where you're using the hide of a dead animal to slay its kin. And so I could see how like there might need to be blessings for that bow and for the warrior who hunts the food. And then in turn, if you were to play an instrument with it, like that would seem not so much sacrilegious, but like very taboo or disrespectful. And I think the taboo breaking is really fascinating because, again, when we were talking about the Greek one, it's like this idea of, you know, being human in a lot of ways, at least in religious structures, is a form of obedience, right? Like you follow the 10 Commandments, you follow the rules of your culture, you follow what the elders tell you, right? And so if you stray from that, if you break that taboo, you're somehow exerting a level of strength to say fuck it to all of that stuff. And I could see that, yeah, like definitely a form of punishment for that would be turning into this creature that devours other people.
right, right, and yeah. I mean, I think that's a good metaphor for keeping a social structure intact. You know, you don't want people breaking too many rules because then they just start to sort of spiral away from the main group, and then they become a threat to the rest of the people, I guess, right?
So yeah, I mean, yeah. So like if you're trying to keep people in line, that's one way about it. But also too, I think you could have a range of taboos, some that are functional. Like a lot of cultures say like snakes are evil if you look at them or touch them, but that's a preservation thing too, right? Like
Yeah.
if you stay away from snakes, you're less likely to die. So yeah, I think something about that in terms of like the breaking from what is expected, especially if there is some sort of like respect or honorific going on there, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
yeah. And then that the flies in the meat thing would be an example of that functional taboo, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
you die if you
Right.
ate that, probably, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't just die. You would go eat other people, right? What is it? You would.
Yeah. You just basically become a spirit that eats other people, and I think that's what's interesting to me, and it makes sense because you got to think that man, especially earlier man and more people that were more in tune with nature, the biggest threat to you was something that would eat you. So it does make sense that if you were trying to ascribe a threat to another human, then the concept that they eat other people would be very powerful.
By the way, can I just say thanks for the inclusivity? You know, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, and I'm
Hey,
glad that
I didn't
on
even
this
do that
episode
on
of
purpose.
Cannibalism, no, we're being inclusive of all peoples, including our Indigenous Wichuje.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, they weren't saying they didn't really become cannibals. They were saying that, if you break these taboos, you'll become a man eater.
Oh, well, yeah. And if you look at the pictures, it's kind of funny. There's been a trend I've noticed on like TikTok and Instagram where somebody will be like, you think your demons are scary. And then it's like, a native person or an indigenous person, they'll be like, this is, and then like the music's like, like it's this creepy song. And then it's just pictures of like these like, not well known monsters, and They're terrifying.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I always come across that at like midnight when I'm going to bed.
It's the best time to see those.
Totes.
I'm also picking up borderline like Santa Claus type things, right? Like stay in
Yeah.
line, but in Santa Claus case you get rewarded, right? Or the punishment would be a lump of coal. But in this case, the punishment for breaking these sort of norms and taboos is you become the spirit that's too strong and eats all other humans.
Right. Yeah. I think it's really, really kind of an interesting, powerful sort of, I don't know what you would call it, but like a complex that we have as humans, this idea of eventually, if you don't comply within a social group, you become the enemy. And yeah, I mean, what's more nefarious than eating people? You know, and there are a couple things, but
it also might be a self-preservation thing too, of like not setting up your own society. You know, you keep everybody in line. You don't end up creating a different group that can destroy your group, and then you demonize the other pretty heavily. Because it doesn't seem like there's any room for exile shit, which is important in a society, I think.
Right. Yeah. And that kind of dovetails into the early histories, because of course I want to find out, you know, how long have we been doing this? How long have we been eating people? And you know,
how long?
It's been a while, guys. So there's evidence, both archaeological and genetic, that cannibalism has been practiced for hundreds of thousands of years by early Homo sapiens and other archaic hominins, which is interesting. So I guess that would harken back to even chimpanzees eating their own. So it's been, if you know, for humans, it's been hundreds of thousands of years, but this is kind of like just a process of life on Earth. But they found human bones that had appeared to be defleshed by other humans going back to 600,000 years ago. And the oldest Homo sapien bones from Ethiopia show signs of this as well. And some anthropologists, such as Tim D. White, suggest that ritual cannibalism was common in human societies prior to the beginning of the Upper Paleolithic era. This theory is based on a large amount of butchered human bones found in Neanderthal and lower Middle Paleolithic sites. Cannibalism in the lower and Middle Paleolithic may have occurred because of food shortages. And it may also have been suggested that removing dead bodies through ritual cannibalism might have been a means of predator control, aiming to eliminate predators and scavengers' access to humans. And there's a man named Jim Corbett proposed also that after major epidemics, when human corpses are easily accessible to predators, there are more cases of man-eating leopards. So by removing dead bodies through ritual cannibalism before the invention of funeral rites, it may have been a practical reason for hominids in the early ages to use that as predator control.
I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. What's easier? Well, no. I mean, what's easier to dispose of the body by chucking it off a cliff or something? Or no. Let's all eat it. Okay.
It's recycling. it's good for the environment. You know, you don't have to worry about hunting. You don't have to worry about killing some other thing. It's just convenient too.
It's all the lazy boy Neanderthals.
Yeah, the ones who didn't want to hunt.
Yeah. Like, we found this cushy spot. It's real nice, and so we can just chill, guys, and like eat berries and eat the dead, and it's all good. Just chill.
Yeah, but you also have to think, like, even, you know, if you're talking about Upper Paleolithic, you're talking about saber-toothed tigers and giant cats. This isn't just like the leopard or whatever. This is like, you know, giant megafauna, you know.
Megafauna.
Yeah, that's what they were called. But it's interesting too that, like, you would consider, like, at that time, a dead body is a liability for your community, because it's going to attract not just predators, but also disease. So
I guess you're right.
logic,
you can't just keep chucking them off the cliff. You'll just have a big
Right.
body, and then you'll have scavengers hanging around.
Right. Yeah. Unless you want to offload dead bodies miles away from your settlement.
Then you got to carry it all that way.
Right.
I wonder if it went that far though, in thinking, if it was just like, oh, we're hungry.
Food. Yeah.
And that food's right there.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's, but then you got to think too, is like even chimps don't eat their own dead. They eat their enemies dead. Sometimes, not even all the time. So that's something that we kind of just uniquely did.
Maybe there was like a dead body swap, where like you take it to the other village. And
these are Neanderthals, right? So not really us.
Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. We both did it. Yeah. Yeah. So it's both of it. I know that bear mothers will eat their cubs if they think that there's a threat to the cubs. But there's not many cases of like kinship, cannibalism. I think they call it intra-cannibalism. No, intra-cannibalism. And then the other is called exo-cannibalism, where you eat somebody from outside of your kin group. Yeah.
But I'm curious about how Jim Corbett says that there would be more man-eating after a major epidemic. Kind of like what Mike said. Like, why would you want to eat a body that died of like a disease?
Well, I think he says that the corpses would become too great, that it would start bringing like problem animals like leopards, man-eating leopards and stuff.
So removing the bodies.
Yeah, through ritual cannibalism was a way to kind of stave that off.
Yeah, but again, even though you're trying to get rid of those cats, aren't you worried about eating the diseased dead body?
Well, this is 600,000 years ago. They had no idea what disease was.
Yeah, and they probably thought through the ritual it was cleansed or,
Yeah, you're right.
Made empowered or whatever was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't know about germs back then. No concept of it.
Well, and I kind of just wonder too, like, just like you said, like just forgetting our modern understanding of things and trying to go back to that time. Maybe it wasn't seen as gross or bad, but it was a way of keeping the person that you lost with you in a weird way too.
Yeah, certainly. It's abhorrent to us because we live in a specific society, but this is something that is not taboo in other places, and even some places that still exist today. Yeah. I'll just throw one Easter egg out there for modern stuff. I didn't actually include this into the show, but apparently in 2014, officials had to shut down a restaurant in Nigeria because it was selling human meat.
Was it passing it as like other meat?
As bush meat, yeah.
That sounds about right.
Oh, that's
Bush meat
terrible.
gets real sketchy real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And apparently, a flank of chimpanzee and a flank of human look pretty similar. So
I wonder if they taste similar.
They might, dude. I don't know. Everybody said, what did they say? It's the other white meat, which is like, it's kind of like, well, they call it long pig, right?
Long
Yeah.
pig.
Yeah. It used to be called long pig when you ate human.
Well, do you remember when like Jack in the Box got in trouble for selling kangaroo meat as burgers?
Oh no.
Yeah, there's
happened?
like a bust in the 90s, maybe the 80s. Maybe it was just one store. I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but I do remember there was a thing that like Jack in the Box took a big hit because some of their burgers ended up being kangaroo meat and not cow meat, which, when you start to think about it, like if you eat tofu, you can season tofu so that it basically just tastes like the seasoning. And so if you eat tofu for a while and then you eat chicken, you start to realize like there's nothing special about chicken. It's just the seasoning.
What's the protein too?
Yeah, and I guess the texture. But like if you can kind of like manipulate that, it's really hard to tell those things.
Well, and likely most of the cannibalism that was happening was done on a fire where everything just tastes like charcoal and smoke. You're not really tasting the meat anyways.
Yeah.
Good old nutrients.
Good old nutrients, good old cannibalism that's been around for too long. My God.
I don't think we're ever gonna stop.
No, I don't
I
think so
don't-
either.
I mean, if we hit a post-apocalypse, it's gonna
Oh,
happen
it's going to get
again,
worse. Yeah.
right? And then in probably some like occultish sectors, it go, yeah, no, it does go. And there's like a case in Russia. This satanic couple was eating people.
Yep.
So yeah, all that it's gonna go on forever. I don't think there's
Oh,
ever gonna be a time where we stop eating humans, which is weird.
there
It
was
is weird.
yeah, it's super weird. Well, yeah, well, just to piggyback on Mike's Russia story, there's a story off the res. Somebody had like a restaurant, and there's a dead body in the freezer, like two of them, but one of them had like a whole bunch of chunks missing. And I
Yeah.
think it's because the restaurant owner was feeding them to customers to start like disposing of the body.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
mean, just
Probably
think about
mixing it with the chili.
yeah, and then when you think about like manufacturing plants, there's actually an acceptable amount of like bug feces and foreign matter that can get into like anything.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, like you get a human arm in there, as long as in aggregate it's only 0.008% of the content, then they're like, leave it in, like.
Yeah.
Hey,
I mean,
I'm
I don't
fine
know
with
that
a
for sure,
very
but I know.
small amount of prions, all right? As long as it's below the FDA threshold,
Yeah,
it's
that's
okay.
right.
Oh,
There
but
you
you're
go.
in luck. No prions in the arm, right? That's just the brain, or
Yeah.
And human meat,
Usually
right?
in the, yeah.
Mostly in the brain.
Mostly in the brain. Yeah.
Mhm.
But since
Most.
you guys mentioned Russia, I do want to mention a contemporary a contemporary instance of cannibalism, and this is kind of heavy. But it was in the Ukraine. It's called Holodomor, and it was a giant famine in which millions of people died. And there's a famous sort of concept or piece that talked about how the government had to get to a point of discouraging people from eating their children.
Oh no.
Because the famine got that bad. And if you can imagine that millions of people died from the famine, I don't know how many people were eaten.
Oh God.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's, as I said, it's a bummer of a fucking episode, guys.
Jesus.
I know.
But like I said, like that human, or I guess that animal thing to survive, right? That self-preservation. And if you don't have the skills to, I guess, or not the skills, sorry, the resources to keep yourself alive, you're just going to switch right back into that monkey brain.
Yep.
Try to eat whatever you can.
Yeah, get whatever you can get your hands on. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, well then I want to move on to Unas, which is the cold open I did. It's called Unas in the Cannibal Hymn. So Unas was a pharaoh in the ninth dynasty, or the ninth ruler of the fifth dynasty. Sorry, and he reigned for, they couldn't really say 100%, but they think from 15 to 30 years, mid 2400 BC. And Unas is unique in that he has, so in every pharaoh's tomb, there's a whole bunch of inscriptions, and some of those inscriptions are hymns, and they talk about, the great things that, the pharaoh is going to do in the afterlife. And Unas is unique in that only he and another pharaoh called Tetes, I believe, Tetes, Tetes, yeah. They are the only pharaohs that have this quote unquote cannibal hymn. And you guys heard it in the cold open, but I'll just go over it real quick. It goes, a god who lives on his fathers, who feasts on his mothers. Unas is the bull of heaven, who rages in his heart, who lives on the very being of every god, who eats their entrails. When they come, their body full of magic from the Isle of Flame. And yes.
That. Okay, I'm just gonna.
What?
Oh no, I was just curious of the definition of one of the words. How it was being
come?
used. Yeah, I don't know. What are you talking about there?
I think it's when they come, like
arrive.
Not. Yeah, when they arrive.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking of the white foam, and I'm like, I don't know. Is that
I know, right?
too?
Yeah. You got a bowl of heaven, and I don't know what's going on. But I thought this was really interesting, because then we get to this concept of eating the gods, right? And I thought that was kind of a cool idea. Not a cool idea, but very rich in symbolism. This concept of a man vaulting himself so high that he even starts to consume the gods.
No, I would say that's a pretty cool idea. Like, it's definitely mythic.
Transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me a
super
little
epic.
bit of like a God of War type story, right? Like you have this man whose family gets killed and goes and takes his revenge against the gods and kills each one in the pantheon, right? Or someone's in the pantheon. Becomes the God of War himself. Thus, like creating that sort of transformation through cannibalizing one of the gods, if not multiple, in that pantheon. But it's definitely a pretty rad idea.
Yeah, there you go. Get so awesome that you can start to consume the gods yourself, I guess.
Now, how do you think that can be done?
I don't know, right? I mean, it seems to...
Interdimensionality. If you could travel to a dimension where gods are itty bitty and you can just swallow them whole.
It's like interdimensional Pac-Man.
Right, exactly. Like, I wonder sometimes, did these pharaohs, were they able to tap into that stuff? Oh, I don't know.
What if you're just like, the mosquito? So like you're tiny compared to this guy, but you just
you take a little nibble.
Yeah. Take a little nibble.
And then it becomes like death by 1,000 nibbles sort of thing.
Right. Well, and there goes the idea of, sort of like life being sustaining, like if you could just live off a little nibble of the gods, that kind of means that they have all of the power for sustaining you.
That's like totally a shirt. A little mosquito, and it just says, just a little nibble.
Just a nibble.
Then like humans become parasitic, right, to the gods.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like this elite group just trying to travel through dimensions just to get a little nibble and then get the hell out.
Yeah.
I'm so pissed if I was like a god and then like some humans.
It's like God jumping into a swamp and getting leeches on him.
Yeah.
And now we understand where sycophants come from.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm really interested in the notion of like I guess I talked about it before, but like metaphorical cannibalism. So if you can extract knowledge out of somebody, and you extract all their knowledge for a specific craft or just whatever parameters you need, right? Isn't that in some instance of cannibalistic learning?
I think so. I think that, well, no, because what you were saying. Okay, sorry. I just I interrupted Nick.
No,
go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just agreeing. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just thinking about like LA, and how often people want to know you to know who you know, and then they get that connection and then they leave you and they go to that person. And your butt hurt until that person gets left because they're leapfrogging to another person. And so to me, that's like a very relational cannibalistic attitude.
Social cannibalism.
Yeah, a little bit. And then, and when you say like intellectual cannibalism, it's true. You can be talking with people and then it's like, there's no more topics. Go to the next one. And that.
Or it's like they steal all of your ideas and present them as themselves, their own.
Yeah, there's that too. Oh, and then corporate cannibalism, right? Corporations eating other corporations.
I think everything has a cannibalism now.
Everything's cannibalism.
Called acquisitions and mergers.
Yeah,
it's not called.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Well, that's actually the point of Pretty Women, right? He was a mergers and acquisition guy, but he sold all the companies he bought, and she was like, "Maybe you don't chop it up into little pieces and sell it." Like,
yeah, no, that LA is. Yeah, I like that notion of social cannibalism though, because people are bizarre, and that. Yeah, you're surrounded by sycophants in a sense, which are just parasitic people that eat each other to get to the next biggest person.
Just a nibble.
Just trying to get closer to the nibble. Something or someone that they think of as a god, which is silly in itself, but to get that close and then nibble off of that person, not even try to do anything in themselves.
Oh, even
just become a lamprey on a whale.
Fucking Nick, a lamprey. You would come up with that like analogy, but you know, I also thought about like social like influencers and stuff, right? Like there's that sense where if you can like have a small account latch onto a bigger account, and then they do like a collab, and that's how you grow your brand. It's kind of the same thing. You're like cannibalizing some of those followers.
Mm-hmm.
Or the thing that you attach yourself to. You know?
Yes.
It's like thanks for the ride.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, I think it's just baked into reality. Competition is baked into reality, and so, like, you know, we're vying for resources, and your ultimate resource is your life, and you know, everything else is just kind of like a subsequent resource. But it would seem that, yeah, it would seem just like crabs. Apparently, evolution just keeps turning things into crabs. We
What?
are using cannibalism everywhere. Yeah, dude, have you heard that? Like, apparently evolution is just turning everything into crabs.
What?
Yes.
Crabs are perfect.
Yeah,
What?
they're perfect.
What?
Yeah.
They're perfect animals.
They eat crab. I'm so confused.
Yeah, apparently they're just the most efficient creature. So
This is why we need to bring the
evolution
exobits back.
is- Yeah, I
There's
know.
a whole
Why
exobit
is
on-
everything turning into crabs?
Yeah.
Definitely gonna do that.
Crab people.
Yes.
Crab people.
Finally.
Crab people.
I just learned about lizard people. Now I gotta learn about crab people. What's next?
I know, right?
Lobster people.
Well, let's
Dog
learn about
people.
the mummy craze. How about
Mummy
that?
people. Okay.
Mummy people. I got this really good article, and it's the Smithsonian Mag, so I want to shout it out before I get into the content. But it's
Their
called
stuff is so good.
it's called The Gruesome History of Eating Corpses as Medicine. And
What a title.
I know, right? And it really talks about the sort of mummy eating craze that happened in the 16 and 1700s. Even, I guess, 16, 1700s mostly. But I just took an excerpt out of this because I thought the entire article is really interesting. So if you guys want to read it, please go check that out. It's called, again, The Gruesome History of Eating Corpses as Medicine, and it's on the SmithsonianMagazine.com. And it's a really interesting article, but it goes on to talk about these two books that were that cover the topic of what we'll call the mummy eating craze. And one was by a man named Richard Sugg of England's University of Durham. And it's called Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires, The History of Corpse Medicine from the Renaissance to the Victorians. And it reveals that for several hundred years, peaking in the 16th and 17th century, many Europeans, including royalty, priests, and scientists, routinely ingested remedies containing human bones, blood, and fat as medicine for everything from headaches to epilepsy. There were few vocal opponents to the practice, even though cannibalism is newly explored Americas was reviled as a mark of savagery. But in Europe, mummies were stolen from Egyptian tombs, and the skulls were taken from Irish burial sites. And then the grave robbers sold the body parts to the medicine industry, quote unquote, in Europe. And this guy goes on to say the question was not, should you eat human flesh, but what sort of flesh should you eat, says Sugg. And the answer at first was the Egyptian mummy. And I did some research on this because I did know that, like, 100% for a fact they did eat mummies and they ground up mummies for medicine. But I came across this something called mumia, and it's really interesting because apparently this word mumia was an ancient Persian word for a sort of like dirt or asphalt that they used in medicine. And so through translations of different things, apparently Europeans like misunderstood this asphalt called mumia from Persia as mummies. And so they just started using mummies as medicine when it was actually mumia, which is like this weird asphalt that comes from the Middle East that helped with people with like cuts and stuff.
So you're
And
saying rubbing dirt on it is actually
actually,
good?
yes, yeah, that's what they were doing. They were rubbing dirt on it. But apparently, it got lost in translation, and by the time the Europeans found out about it, they assumed that it was mummies and not dirt.
That's a blunder.
It is a blunder. It is a blunder. And so the craze
What?
of eating mummies was born, basically. But
By a
they
mistranslation.
kind of, yeah, by a mistranslation. And so
Wow.
what they would do is they crumbled the Egyptian mummies into tinctures to stanch internal bleeding, apparently. But other body parts would soon follow. And so skulls were one common ingredient, and they were taken in powdered form to cure head ailments. So I guess it's like, oh, you have a headache? Just have some skull. It's just, that'll be good for you, right?
I kind of like
yeah.
you hinted there's this notion of like seasonability, like, oh, it's summer, so it's time to eat some mummies. But in the wintertime, we eat this other culture.
Yeah. We drink the blood. I'll talk about that in a second too. A guy named Thomas Willis in the 17th century was a pioneer of brain science, and he brewed a drink for apoplexy that mingled powder human skull and chocolate. And King Charles II of England sipped what was called the King's Drop in his personal tincture, and it contained human skull and alcohol. And even the toupee moss that grew over a buried skull was called usnea, which became a prized additive. Its powder was believed to cure nosebleeds and possibly epilepsy. Human fat was also treated or used to treat the outside of the body, and German doctors, for instance, prescribed bandages soaked in human fat for wounds, and it was also considered a remedy for gout. Human fat. Then we get onto the blood, which is more of a wintertime thing, I would think. Like you want to have a nice, yeah, exactly. You want to have a nice warm blood, yeah. I would say that the skull moss is probably like a springtime thing, and then you'd have like the fall as you get into the blood. But blood was procured as fresh as possible, and while it's still thought to contain the vitality of the body. So basically, they just said fresh blood makes you fresh. This requirement though made it challenging. And in the 16th century, a German-Swiss physician named Paracelsus, believed blood was good for drinking, and one of his followers even suggested taking blood from a living body. While that doesn't seem to have been common practice, the poor, who couldn't always afford the processed compounds sold in apothecaries, could gain the benefit of cannibal medicine by standing by at executions, paying a small amount for a cup of still warm blood of the condemned.
Oh.
The executioner was considered a big healer in Germanic countries, and he was the social leper with almost magical powers.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So can you imagine you're getting executed in medieval Germany, and you have people with cups, and you get to think about the symbolism of the chalice of the cup catching Jesus's blood. Now we know what the hell the blood was being caught for. They were drinking Jesus.
Oh my God.
They still do.
They still do, technically, yeah.
Oh my God!
You could even consider the Eucharist a form of metaphorical cannibalism. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, on a side note, when you were talking about Mamma Mia, I thought about that musical Mamma Mia, and when you replace the lyrics, it's Mamma Mia, here I go again, my. How can I resist you? It works. It's secretly a musical about Mamma Mia.
It's a good musical about eating mummies. Yes,
you heard it here first, guys. You gotta have that paper sound. You've heard it here.
Now we're all gonna be tracked down. We know their secrets.
It says also there, for those who preferred their blood cooked, a 1679 recipe from a Franciscan apothecary describes how to make it into a marmalade.
Oh, nice.
So that's nice. You can have a little jelly, a little blood jelly. But
had a blood sausage.
no, I have not.
I've had to help make it.
Yeah.
I've had it. It doesn't taste like anything.
Yeah.
You
Maybe
know-
Not human
irony.
blood, of course.
Right.
Well, it's funny, as a kid, and I would see my uncle or my aunts butcher sheep, and it's a bloody affair. I'm not gonna lie, but they catch the blood to make blood sausage. But if you get caught, like anytime I would see the bowl or the butcher knife pulled out, like at 4 a.m, I would run away. I would stay away all day because if you don't, you have to help. And I remember I got stuck at home. And they made me massage the blood because, blood coagulates. So you have to keep stirring it.
Yeah, nobody
And,
wants blood skin. Come on.
right, exactly. And I would use my hand. I'd have to use my hands. You're just spinning your hand in blood. It's just it's and then
Sounds
you
like
think
fun
about
times.
people holding a
Yeah.
cup at an execution and
then drinking it.
drinking that.
Yeah.
And like that's not like the blood of like a good person. That's a bad person. I'm assuming if they're being executed. Although people who were unjustly executed happen a lot. So
But you get the power, though.
Yeah, you get their healing abilities.
no, you just get help with your gout or what did they? Let's see. In the Germanic place,
They thought it
what
was
did
good
they-
for vitality, which interestingly enough has been proven to be true. I wish that
Stop.
I had I wish I had the article, but what's happening now is that rich people are paying young, healthy people to stay healthy to get blood transfusions from them every month.
What?
So you could have a job. Yeah. So rich people will have their people go to a gym, find a person who's in peak physical health and say, hey, I'll pay you 10 grand a month to stay in peak physical health and feed yourself only these things as a part of your diet. And all you have to do is donate your blood to me once a month.
Oh, why the F wasn't that job in existence when I was young? What the
Right.
hell? Man.
What's
I
your
just
job?
wonder-
Oh, I'm a blood bag. I'm
Yeah.
a blood bag for a billionaire.
For $10,000 a month? Ah, dude.
Yeah.
And just get paid to like continue to be healthy?
Yeah,
Yes.
but the
I feel like,
scientific-
you know what? My blood needs massage. My
How
blood
do you
needs
file that,
facials.
though, in your taxes?
I know, right? Yeah. It's going to be very strange.
Yeah.
I don't.
point.
That doesn't
That's a good
sound like the
point.
most legal thing in the world.
It's
I
probably
will
not.
say, my mom got very sick one time and she lost close to half her blood volume. She was in the ICU, almost died. And they gave her blood, and I guess blood is categorized. So I remember the guy who came in, he was like, oh, they gave you the good blood. And it was because it was like youthful blood.
Mhm.
And dude, for like a year after that, I'd never seen my mom so like energized. Like she just
Oh,
was
yeah.
bouncing all over the place. And I was like, oh, it was that young blood, man. Like, dang.
Well, then
wonder-
they found that there's actually something to it. So an older person injecting themselves with young blood actually reverses the aging process.
But
Hey,
is it-
Mike, you're younger than us, right?
Oh, wow. You see the vampires come out all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Survive, man.
I think I'm a lot older than you think.
His blood is just full of coffee and whiskey, anyways. So
Yeah, you don't want none of that.
Cigarettes.
And free range spike protein. You don't want
Yeah.
any of that
I get
stuff.
injected with his blood, and I'm just like, oh my god. That's not.
Why am I
good.
angry all the time?
Mhm.
Now I just want cigarettes.
Oh my god, I'm talking about stoics all the time.
But I wonder how much that executioner made. Like, because that's a good side hustle. Yeah.
That's a good
Mhm.
side hustle.
Yeah, you probably paid 6 pence for for a cup of blood.
And isn't it fascinating that the person who goes to the young person about donating their blood is also an executioner of some type, right? Because the chances that the young person would just think they can live on that forever, and so they don't actuate themselves to actually find another vocation.
Mhm.
Don't they kind of lose their life because
Yeah,
once,
you're kind of stealing their youth from them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure you would feel like when you donate blood, you feel weak afterwards.
Oh yeah.
I donated blood when I was younger. So
Never been
I would,
able to.
I would imagine after so many transfusions, you don't feel too good.
Yeah.
once a
Yes,
month is
indeed.
fine. My dad has no, it's true. My dad donates once a month, and he has really special blood that they only use on premature babies that need blood. I don't know what his blood type is. It's some fancy blood. So they are always calling him. Like it could be like 30 days and a half a day. It's bring. He's like, oh, they're calling me for blood again. And like every time I hang out with him, he's getting a call about blood. It's bizarre. Like they love his blood. And he does it and he seems fine. So
She's like, no, stop calling me about blood. Don't.
I know. And that's a shame. Well, and I'm such a tease because like I have really good blood too. Like I think I have universal blood, but I'm always deficient. So they're always like, oh, good blood. And then they're like, oh, you can't donate. You're like iron deficient or whatever. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what they always tell me.
That fat reminds me a little bit of Fight Club. I was gonna call it Fat Club. It's a completely different club.
The human fat for soap.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Although it is interesting that you could take fat out of one place and inject it another place. I thought that was an interesting commentary. Acceptable fat, from like a big. Anyway, that's different.
Yeah, but I wonder too if consuming, if there is like any effects to consuming the blood, if that ruins it versus having it injected.
Yeah, probably the consumption would just destroy the blood, and so it wouldn't actually get into your bloodstream because your stomach will just, dissolve all the stuff that's actually useful.
It's true.
Yeah, so I think they were doing it the amateur way, obviously, by just drinking human blood. But sometimes they would rub fat on an ache to ease your pain. They would also push the powdered moss. So that was the moss that grew on top of the skulls. They would push that up your nose to stop a nosebleed.
Wait, go back for a second. Are you talking about like there's a skull and it's in the ground and moss just grows right
specifically
there?
From Celtic burial grounds. So there were two different types of dead body that were prized. It was the Egyptian mummies first, but those eventually ran out. And so they started using Celts and Celtic burial grounds and using the dead bodies of them to make these medicines.
Dude.
Yeah.
I wonder, so back in in Greek times, the Celtics, they were considered to be fearless, like completely fearless. This is because, for some reason they had a hard time getting into like Germania and all those different regions.
Right.
So I wonder if that European notion has anything to do with that. Like, it's why they use the Celts, is they saw that blood is valuable.
Maybe also a connection with the Druids too, possibly that type of like sort of Druidic religion, maybe. It's also
insight.
Yeah. Well, the parallel to the sort of the Egyptian religion too, with the pharaohs and that. Yeah.
No, there's others cultures too where drinking blood is like that transfer of power, outside of vitality. Like you gain other skills, I guess.
Yeah. Most notably though, the things that worked were something was called the King's Drop, and that was when you would grind up a skull and then mix it with alcohol. This goes on to state that it was likely the alcohol that was treating people for like headaches and stuff, and not the actual skulls. Go figure.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Until the next day, then you have a bigger headache.
Yeah, that's right. And you need more skull. Yeah,
you need more. What would you like if you found a bottle of this stuff, right? Like you're a treasure hunter or something. You find a bottle of this stuff and you know what it is. Would you get a little curious and try and get? And you'd be like,
oh, I don't know, man. So many curses back then,
You open it and like
cursed.
like a giant skull comes out, like a skull ghost.
Yeah. Oh, dude,
That's
no,
true.
forget it. Yeah, I'm too superstitious. But there were other reasons considered for the consumption of humans was considered to be a potent sort of amplifier of the spirit. And it was the spirit that was considered a very real part of physiology. And so in this context, blood especially was powerful. They thought that blood carried the soul, and so did in its form a vaporous spirit. And the freshest blood was considered the most robust. Sometimes the blood of young men was preferred, sometimes of virginal women, of course. And by ingesting the corpse materials, one gains the strength of the person consumed. And to quote Leonardo da Vinci, we preserve our life with the death of others. In a dead thing, insensate, life remains which... Wait. In a dead thing, insensate, life remains which, when it is reunited with the stomachs of the living, regains sensitive and intellectual life.
What?
So apparently Leonardo da Vinci was eating them humans too.
Canceled.
I know, right?
Oh my God. And insensate is lacking physical sensation,
Oh, okay.
lacking sympathy or compassion, unfeeling, completely lacking sense or reason.
Mm.
In a dead thing, insensate life. Wow. He really said that?
Yep. Yeah. This is all according to the author Sugg in his book. And, this isn't like, some bullshit book. This guy really,
Dude.
I mean, this is part of the Smithsonian article. So,
he was only around for a few more 100 years.
yeah. But yeah, that sort of ends the 300-year so span where basically using human remains was all the rage in medicine.
All the rage.
It really was. Like, that was the thing to do for
still,
about 15 to 1800.
We still use human bodies in medicine, right? Well, transplants and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, fetal tissue, we use that. Yep.
It's just slightly different now. There's less focus on, consuming it and putting it on your cuts and wounds.
Yeah, it's more about
it's
synthesizing.
Less recreational.
Yes, it is less recreational. Yeah, that's true.
little thing called rules now.
Yeah.
So what a weird drug. Yeah, I drink blood. It makes me stronger. I have to drink it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, and then you wonder why there's so many vampire lores and all of that stuff. Like, if drinking blood was actually quite a common practice, you can imagine that somebody who might have taken it overboard became like a hemophiliac and, was only drinking blood, and then probably became really grotesque and malnourished.
Do you think there's like blood bars? Like there's like a black market speakeasy industry for blood?
I bet you there probably was, especially amongst the aristocracy. I bet you there was. I mean, I guarantee you there were parties thrown by the rich where they just killed somebody and consumed them.
Oh, was it True Blood? Where like there was on some vampire movie or TV show where the rich were able to afford human livestock,
right?
And pretty much party in that blood.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that can't be a possibility. I'm sure there were some really fucked up rich people back then.
Those taboos, right? Once you kind of start to break them, you start to adventure on your own, and then all hell is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and speaking of taboos, I want to get on to our next iteration, which is the Agori. For those that don't know, the Agoris are a Hinduist sect in India that are still around today. And they are devotees of Shiva, manifested as Bhairava, and the monists who seek moksha from the cycle of reincarnation or samsara. This freedom is a realization of the self's identity with the absolute. And because of this monastic doctrine, the Agoris maintain that all opposites are ultimately illusory. The purpose of embracing pollution and degradation through various customs is the realization of non-duality. And through transcending social taboos, attaining what is essentially an altered state of consciousness and perceiving the illusory nature of all conventional categories. And so in Agori rituals, which are performed precisely to oppose the notion of purity commonplace in Orthodox Hinduism, are typically macabre in nature. Practices of the Agoris varies, but some of them also live in cemeteries. They smear cremation ashes on their body. They use human skull for decoration and bowls. They smoke marijuana. They drink alcohol, and they meditate on top of corpses. Although contrary to mainstream Hinduism, these practices exemplify the Agori philosophy of criticizing commonplace social relations and fears through the use of culturally offensive acts. Furthermore, they demonstrate the Agori's acceptance of death as a necessary and part of the human experience. And I think the Agori aesthetic is quite fascinating. It's a far departure from what we experience here in America. But I wanted to also bring up that the CNN did a piece on the Agoris, I think maybe 10 years ago. And this guy named Reza Aslan had to go and meet them. And they're notoriously like cranky, and they just threaten to eat you all the time. So this reporter went to meet with the Agoris, and apparently he was talking so much they told him they said to him, if you don't stop talking so much, we are going to eat you. And then they made him eat a piece of human brain on live TV.
I think I remember hearing that.
Yeah.
I see some parallels to cynicism, though, with the respect of like doing these culturally outrageous things to show that, to get rid of that non-dual, or to get rid of duality as a whole, or to kind of criticize the culture as a whole. But this gets a little bit more extreme as far as written records go.
Yeah, I think they do it to the utmost. I think there was an Idiot Abroad episode where Carl Pilkington meets some Agori people. And they were some sketchy dudes, and he was camping out on a beach, and like a couple, I don't know, maybe a half a mile away was an Agori group doing their like nightly rituals, and he decided to leave because they were scaring the crap out of him.
That's probably wise.
Yeah.
Well, and that Carl Pilkington episode, or the series, is just freaking hilarious. It's this like, good. Yeah, I don't even know how you describe it. It's like this kind of I don't know. He's like just kind of sad and boring. And his friend Ricky Gervais just likes to make him uncomfortable all the time.
And yeah, he's a simple little Englander who never had been outside of, Britain.
Yeah.
And
then
he
like
gets thrust to all around the world.
And his commentary is fucking hilarious because like the stuff that he notices or that he contemplates, it's like, it doesn't add up. And then he explains and you're like, interesting.
But I think these Agori folk are kind of I get what they're doing. I get why they're doing it. I think that everybody probably understands, but at the same time, like these people are kind of a nuisance, and I understand the point that they're making, though. It's like there is a rationale to challenging taboos sometimes, and yeah.
I wonder if this got more extreme over time, because that's what you find with the cynics. They begin like contrary, like being contrarian, but criticizing Greek society in a certain amount of ways, but being true to this little thing. And then over the course of the years and time goes by, they stray a little bit further from this core philosophy, to the point where like Julian's around and he's looking back on the cynics the way that we look back on them now, as like this depraved group of, like a nuisance, like a depraved group of people who aren't actually true to their core philosophies or what they actually meant to be. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that, where like if you found the first instance of the Agori, if they were doing this sort of stuff, they were threatening people that they were going to eat them, or if it was much more restrained in a way.
Yeah, I think it probably, I think it might have been a lot more conservative some time ago.
Yeah, because you can see people kind of do this today with their own personal taboos, right? Like if you're really healthy and you work out all the time, but you have a cheat day, so you break your taboos for one day, and you pollute your body, so to say, with whatever the hell you want to just remind yourself that you're a human being and not like an automaton or something. So we do see like this sort of philosophy work out here, but just very minorly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in moderation. I think these guys have probably taken it overboard. Once you're smoking weed and meditating on top of a dead body, it's like,
hey, as long as they pass it to the corpse,
there you go. Yeah. But yeah, there's those guys are a trip. I've seen some videos of them. They're very trippy dudes. But there are a couple other instances I wanted to get to, but I think I'm ready to wrap up with you guys. I do want to mention some of the incidences. I came across a list, and it is like every continent, every culture, every human is guilty of having some sort of connection to cannibalism. So we talked a little bit earlier about the Donner Party. The Donner Party was a caravan a la Oregon Trail in the 1840s with a group of settlers that were going to California. They got lost in the Sierra Nevadas. And one company, which was about 17 people, or a party, I should say, of men and women, got stranded snowshoeing in the Sierra Nevadas. And I believe something around like all but 7 of them survived. And they basically got to the point where they were so hungry they had to vote to who to kill in order to eat them. And that was just the first person they ate. They then went on to eat 6 more people over the course of their being lost, only to be saved, thankfully, by some Native Americans who gave them pine needles and acorns to eat instead.
It's real good.
Yeah, it's nice of them. I mean, it's like, damn, that could have probably saved a few people, right? But there's also the Holodomor, which we talked about in the Ukraine, North Sentinel Island, which recently made the news not too long ago because a missionary was murdered there. The North Sentinelese people have been quarantined, for lack of a better word, from society because they are a threat to any outsider. They will kill and likely eat you. So nobody is allowed to go there anymore, which, I think that's fine. They can just stay on their island.
Actually weren't allowed to go there before. If I remember correctly, that missionary guy
wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah, no, he just was like, no, I'm going to to be going here. And
well, that's what happens.
Well.
Shock and awe. I say we go there with full shock and awe.
Yeah. Just dun, 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 dun. Ride of the Valkyries just start,
oh god,
napalm and everything.
Let's not.
Love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Yeah.
No, just let them be.
Yeah, they're fine. I'm sure they'll breathe themselves out of existence soon enough.
Maybe, or they'll outlive us all. Who knows? But then also we have more, humanistic cases, and sometimes cannibalism isn't about like a social thing. It's about a human or just an individual thing. In this case, obviously, we have Jeffrey Dahmer, which everybody remembers as a famous serial killer in the 70s who killed, I forget how many young men and a few women, but then kept some of their meat in his freezer and apparently admitted to consuming the meat on occasion. And there's been many, many other instances of just personal cannibalism that have gone on. I didn't even want to really read off the rest of the names, but I found like a list of 30 famous cases in the last 70 years. So yeah, it is happening, guys, and y'all have to be very careful, I guess.
There's the
Being eaten by another human is not out of the realm of possibility.
There's that line in Hannibal, I think, or maybe Silence of the Lambs, where he's like, "I'm having an old friend for dinner."
Oh, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Such a
Yep.
well line.
Oh, and he's eating that dude's brain while it's like, well, he's at the dinner table.
Yeah, there's that scene too.
It's always fun.
Just don't get eaten by things. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, just don't get eaten by humans. That's all you have to do.
Or bears, or alligators, or cats. Anything, really.
Yeah. Although, no, I know. I guess I would be okay with a bear eating me because I'm like, well, it's a bear. I think I'd be more pissed off about a human eating me.
Like, why don't you know better? Who raised you,
exactly.
Sort of thing? Yeah. Well, hopefully you have a chance to fight back against the human if they're eating you.
Right. Or you just haunt them forever. That'll work too. Well, that's all I got for cannibalism, guys. I could have gone deeper, but honestly, it's a depressing subject. And if you guys are interested in reading more, just go look it up on the internet. There is, endless cases and endless examples of this. So, yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Yes, well, you should. It's good. It's good too.
Do you think there's like organized cannibal groups?
Yes, I definitely do. I think that there are groups that eat people. Yeah,
shop for humans and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's like the more dangerous thing, right? When it's multiple groups acting as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to also think that human trafficking is one of the biggest industries on the black market. And not all of it is for sex and murder.
Oh no.
You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be a possibility that somebody's being human trafficked to be eaten.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's why I stay skinny.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No meat on these bones. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, just keep that in mind, everybody listening at home, is that there may be somebody eating somebody right now.
And if you want to join us for our dinner group.
Yeah. Donner party
2.0.
That's right.
2.0. Nibble, just a nibble.
Yeah, just a nibble. All right.
Sweeney Todd and Sweeney Todd's wife, girlfriend. I forget what happens. They get married or not, but you can start serving meat pies.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, until you get a toenail or a finger in there, it's all fun.
Yeah, it's just like a health code violation.
Yeah,
as long as they don't learn that it's humans, just completely in the pie, will be okay.
Right. All right. Well, do you guys have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think I'm good. Okay. That was really well done. Thanks for taking us down that little journey and organizing all of that.
For sure.
Definitely.
It made me hungry.
Yeah.
Well, good. I was hoping that it would make you hungry. I just hope that it makes you ponder a little bit about the human condition and some of the lower ends of the vibrational spectrum that we experience. So.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We hope that it wasn't too dark of an episode for you, but it is Spooktober. So be afraid, be very afraid. Please consider giving us a thumbs up on our Facebook and YouTube page, and perhaps a subscription to our YouTube channel at Exofathom. We would very much appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you all. We are a part of the Think Ring page too. You can check us out there on Facebook, where we have a myriad of other podcasts: If Numbers Could Talk, Strawberries and Coffee, and Screen Time Continuum. Please feel free to go check out those other podcasts that we're a part of on the Think Ring Talks page on Facebook as well. And yeah, thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. And until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.